This is a big fish. This is a dinosaur, shaped like a torpedo, made up entirely of the most delicious sashimi on earth. But sashimi is not the reason we're so excited. The real reason is because of how far we've come to get to this point. These fish are formidable, they're hard to find, and even harder to land. Their power is legendary in the world of spearfishing, and this one didn't disappoint. But I wasn't the one who speared. My buddy did. Oh, and feel free to roast him in the comments for the questionable gut shot. Do you see that blood dripping out of its mouth? It's clips like this that make brands afraid to sponsor my videos. But that's fine, because you see that hat right there? That's my new merch, which is available on aquaticapes.com. But it's not really YouTuber merch. It's more of just a high-quality hat, inspired by the classic polo cap, each with a different fish design embroidered on the front that I'm able to seamlessly promote while simultaneously murdering giant fish. Like so. Anyways, under that stunningly handsome hat is a fish that I just speared a few minutes earlier. But deep down, behind my smile, I'm mortified. Because my doggy might not be as big as this one. I'm gonna tell this story backwards. So let's start at the very end. We're having a party.
My booze. Great video.
We're celebrating the first big catch of the trip. We're grilling lobster and grouper, but not the tuna that you just saw. Those fish are long gone. Oh, and if you're wondering if it's a fire hazard to have a makeshift barbecue on the back of a giant wooden ship like this, well, then you probably haven't spent much time in Indonesia before. Indonesia is made up of over 17,000 islands. And today is day 3 of a journey around some of the most dog-toothed tuna-infested rocks in the entire country. I can't actually show you the rocks because they're so overrun with big doggies that I'm afraid that some of my sneakier subscribers will scour Google Earth to try to find them for themselves. At least that's what I'd do. Anyways, for the purposes of this story, they look pretty similar to this. A friend of mine once described this area as Dog-Toothed Tuna Jurassic Park. And I think that sums it up perfectly. As I write this voiceover, I'm trying to figure out a way to describe to you, the audience, why I so desperately want to launch a spear through one of these animals. But I don't really know what the reason is. I do know that if it were easy, I probably wouldn't care as much. I don't just care though. I'm obsessed. It's all I think about. It's all I talk about. Even the background of my phone and my computer are photos of these rocks. This is my 7th liveaboard trip around these islands this year. I have almost no money left in my bank account, and every time I do have some savings, I blow it on another trip out here. I wonder if this is what it feels like to be a compulsive gambler. Probably. Anyways. Until today, the biggest doggy I've ever caught was just 27 kilos, which, to be honest, is pretty unimpressive. The compulsion I have to catch them probably comes from the inner hunter-gatherer that's hardwired into all of our brains. And it is a compulsion, a genuine addiction. Having said that, there are worse things to be addicted to than tuna. We're so far away from civilization that it's actually impossible to come here unless you're living on a boat. But we're not the only ones living on boats around here.
Halo. Selamat siang.
We run into some commercial octopus divers, as one does, and since we have so much extra fish, we barter with them. Almost 200 pounds of tuna for about 10 octopus. I think they might have gotten the better end of the deal. Later, we make a similarly lopsided trade with some lobster divers as well. But that's okay, because the honest truth is, it's hard to justify spearing more fish when the freezer on the boat is already overflowing. And speaking of spearing fish, let's jump over to the beginning of the trip. This is day 1. Everyone's excited, especially me. I'm finally back, and I'm hungry, maybe too hungry. I've actually made this mistake before. but I'm too full of adrenaline and testosterone to recognize it just yet. I'm a little rusty. It's been almost 2 months since I last speared, and on one of my first dives I see a doggy, but my fins are caught up in my float line. It's a stupid rookie mistake, but it can be fatal if you get tangled up underwater with a big, powerful animal like this. Anyways, all the movement from untangling myself scares the fish away. But instead of being patient and waiting to hopefully see it again later, I try to force the shot from way too far. And obviously, completely miss. What's worse is that I don't even realize that I made the mistake. Instead, I blame my spear gun. I think maybe my shaft is bent. Despite the fact that I spent hours with it in the pool back home in Bali before the trip so that I could avoid this exact situation. Anyways, I don't see any more doggies around, so I decide to hunt some reef fish. And there are tons of them. On this dive, I line up on a nice midnight snapper. And miss completely. That shot was way too long. But of course, in the moment, I don't think that. I'm sure it's the gun's fault. Shortly after, I spear a big red bass in basically the exact same spot on the reef. But my aim's bad, and the fish breaks free. At this point, I'm 100% certain that my gun is f***ed up. Which is pretty disappointing, considering how much time and money I've invested into coming all the way out here. You know how baseball players have slumps where they start playing badly just because they have it in their mind that they're no longer a good player? Well, the same thing can happen with spearfishing. And now, after just a few hours of the first day of this amazing trip, I am officially in a slump. But I decide to take one more dive and make sure that I do everything perfectly, on the off chance that I made the mistake on those past few dives rather than my gear. So I lay on the ocean floor, nice and calmly, without making any sudden movements, and when the fish comes within range, I take my time, aim very carefully, straighten my arm before firing, and lo and behold, a perfect shot. Finally, that post-nut clarity starts to set in. I realize that my gear is fine. I was just rusty and impatient. I was taking shots that were too far, not straightening my arm when firing, and not being nearly relaxed enough to allow the fish to come closer. And I know better than that. I do feel kinda bad that I ended the life of this snapper just for target practice, but it is what it is. The crew ate it that evening, and to be honest, if I could go back in time, I'd do it again. Because shortly after sunrise on the next day, I encounter the biggest dogtooth tuna that I've ever seen in my life. You can see it here. I consider pulling the trigger sooner, but remember my mistakes from the day before? And, surprise, surprise, the fish swims even closer because I don't scare it off. And now, it's go time. Each one of these yellow floats is pumped up to 44 psi, but the fish takes both of them down multiple times as if they're nothing. The only thing going through my mind right now is to try to keep the fish away from the bottom of the ocean so it doesn't get tangled. And after about 15 minutes of extreme underwater tug-of-war, it eventually runs out of energy. This is the biggest doggy I've ever seen out of the water, by far. I can't believe the size of it. It's hard to describe the satisfaction and sense of accomplishment that I feel in this moment.
PB doggy for Lenny. Here we go. Too weak to lift it up. It was far, and I thought, oh, it's a far shot. And I thought, I'll wait. I missed yesterday. And I waited, and then he turned right in.
But as badly as I want to just sit and bask in my glory, there's no time. Because at this very moment, my buddy's already lining up on another one. There goes the fish, and there goes the floats. Again, at this point, it's super important to keep the fish off the ocean floor. But the fish is too far away for my buddy to grab the line, so I hop in to help. Even after you pull them up, they can come back to life with a sudden burst of energy, which is a serious tangle hazard if you have a bunch of slack rope around you in the water. So, while pulling up the line, I simultaneously swim forward so that all the slack is behind me, just in case. These fish probably lived together in the same school. They've probably been swimming around these rocks for decades. I wonder how old they are. I wonder how smart they are. I wonder if they saw each other in the water, would they recognize one another as a member of their school? Anyways, after some awkward high fives, a wave of relief rushes over me. Because it's now obvious that my fish is slightly bigger than his. Also, my dick is bigger too, I swear. Meanwhile, on a different part of the reef, my other buddy's 31 meters deep looking for grouper. A lesser Spearo might have been distracted by those GTs, but I think we can all agree that he made the right choice to ignore them.
1, 2, 3.
Back on the mothership, we're reminded that nothing is worse than trying to get a slip tip out of a grouper. And in the process, they remove its heart, which is still beating.
How do you say shapka? You know, like in Indiana Jones.
And now, for the moment we've all been waiting for. I swear to God, we spend almost an hour posing for photos. It's a little embarrassing. When a man catches a fish, he often becomes worse than the cringiest person on influencers in the wild. Myself included. I want to be this tough, manly hunter-gatherer that lives off the land and catches his own food with his own 2 hands, just like our ancestors did. But first,
let me take a selfie.